Okay. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. We are so excited to have you. My name is Krista McCoon, and I am the San Joaquin County AgVenture Coordinator. And we're so glad that you're here on our virtual spring trip. We are excited to talk to you today about cattle and auctions. While we let a few more of our friends join, let's go over some general housekeeping rules. If this is your first virtual farm trip, welcome. This is a webinar. So if you're joining us via Zoom, it's a webinar. So you're only going to see the information as we push it out. You won't see a bunch of boxes as if it was a meeting. If you'd like to submit a question, please do so. We encourage that via the Q&A box. If you're joining us via YouTube Live, questions are turned off. Just feel free to sit back, relax, and enjoy the programming. We're very excited to have you here. If you haven't already, this is a great time to get out your worksheet. So this worksheet will follow along with the program that we have for you today. And we'll continue to review those questions as we go on. So today we're going to talk to you about cattle and auctions. And I want to set the stage for you a little bit so we're all on the same page. There's two different types of cattle. So we have dairy cattle and we have beef cattle. And beef cattle are what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to talk about how they kind of journey through that life cycle and that process. So again, we're not talking about dairy cattle. These give us things like milk and cheese and ice cream. We're going to talk about beef cattle that are hamburgers and steaks and beef hides. So keep that in mind. We're talking about beef cattle today, and we'll have a great trip for you. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to auctioneer Grayson. Auctioneer Grayson, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Good morning. So thank you so much for being with us this morning. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And it's my understanding that you're a rancher and an auctioneer. So give us a little bit about that background.
Hello, everybody. So my name is Grayson Haydenmeyer. I'm 18 years old. My family has a cow, calf, and yearling operation, so we focus only on beef cattle. But I myself am a first-generation auctioneer, and we're standing here at Cattleman's Livestock Market located in Galt, California.
That's awesome. And so those of us that are joining live, today is a Tuesday. And so the reason that that's really important is they don't actually do auctions on Tuesday. So the clips you're going to see are from a Wednesday. Wednesday's when they run the cattle auctions here. And it's just safer that we pre-recorded those clips. So if you don't see cattle behind me today, but you see clips with cattle in it, you'll kind of know why. So Grayson, talk to us a little bit about, it's my understanding that beef and producing beef is one of the most complex journeys in the food system. And part of that is because they go change hands 3 to 4 different times during their life cycle. So you mentioned that you and your family have a cow-calf operation. So can you talk to us just real briefly about what that life cycle looks like when a calf is born and then how they would end up here at the auction yard?
Yeah, so typically your calf is going to be born, and normally when they're born, it can vary, but they typically weigh right around 80 pounds. From there, the calf grows up a little bit, and then just like you folks, when you go to the doctor to get your vaccinations, we make sure that our calves are staying as healthy as possible. So they get that also, and then typically, most ranchers ear tag their cows and calves. That is used as a form of identification. That way everybody knows exactly whose its mama is and all of that good stuff. Then from there, as the calf gets bigger, as you kids do, you'll eventually go to college, right? So there, you're kind of getting your own independence. You're growing up. You're getting away from your parents a little bit. We do the same thing with cattle. So we typically wean them, which is the technical definition. So meaning that we end up normally putting them in 2 different fields, right? But there's a fence line between them. So we put all the calves, the babies on one side. We put all of the moms on the other side, and then we wean them. From there, we typically go to a sale yard about 45 days after we get done weaning.
Okay, so just some definitions for our friends that are joining us. So, weaning is when we're separating the cow, which is the mom, and the calf, which is the baby. And you explained to us that you do so by keeping them near each other so they kind of share a fence line so that they can still talk to each other and have that companionship, if you will, but they're separated so that the baby learns to grow on its own. Is that right?
Yes, that's a 100% correct.
Awesome. Okay. So, just to refresh those following along on the worksheet, the journey of raising beef is one of the most complex in the food system. And you said calves, when they're born, are about 80 pounds.
Yes, I would say roughly around 80 pounds, maybe 100, but 80 is probably going to be average.
Can you imagine if you were born as an 80-pound baby, your poor mother? So calves are born really big. How long is the baby calf in the mama's tummy?
That's going to be about 9.5 months,
9.5. So similar to humans, if we go give or take. Okay.
just a
And then
little bit
calves
longer.
just a little longer. Okay. And then calves are weaned, so separated from their moms at about 45 days old. And then another 45 days after that, then they would be ready to go to an auction yard to go to their next owner. Is that right?
A little bit, yeah, that would be right. Calves are typically a little bit older though when we wean them. They're quite a few months old, and typically when we wean them, this is average, right? Ranchers at different operations do everything differently. But for most of our Central California ranchers, we're going to be weaning the calves at around 600 pounds.
600 pounds. Are you telling me that when you bring them to an auction yard, they're at least 600 pounds?
On average, but of course, there's always exceptions.
That's a pretty big calf, if I must say so myself. So, okay, so we've taken you as the rancher have taken really good care of your cattle. I assume that when you move them and separate them and get them on trailers and do those things, you have to do that with maybe a horse or something. How do you move around those cattle in a way that's safe for you and safe for them?
Yeah, so we use horses all the time. Horses are going to be a big part of our team. They help us be able to get around the cattle quickly and efficiently because obviously myself and probably you as well are not going to be able to outrun a cow, right? Or be able to get them as quickly moved as you can with a horse. So yeah, horses are a huge part of our team.
Yeah, I would not. No, that's a big no on this gal being able to outrun a calf. That's not going to happen anytime soon. Okay, so your operation is cow calf, and then it's time for them to grow. What is that next phase? Is that like a stalker yearling operation when they go from cow calf and now they're ready to kind of be on their own? Like you said, maybe we're a teenager. Is that a good, frame of reference for our audience?
Yes, I think it's a very good frame of reference because they're getting that independence. They're old enough that they get going and be on their own. So yeah, I would definitely say that's a very good frame of reference for it. And normally by then they're able to live just on their own, almost like an adult is able to.
Okay, we have a question for you. Suzanne Carroll wants some clarification. What age are the calves again, average, we get that. What age are the calves weaned? And then how much longer after that are they taken to a stocker yearling operation or an auction
So
yard?
So I would say typically they're going to be weaned around 10 months old, somewhere in that range, maybe 9, somewhere in that. And then we will keep them normally for about 45 days. So they stay on the ranch. We wean them from their mothers through that fence line. Then they stay on the ranch for typically around another 45 to 60 days until they're fully weaned, they're fully independent. And then from there, every rancher does it differently. But typically, those calves, which then could be almost classified as yearlings, will then come to the sale yard where they're able to go to their next home.
Okay, so they're weaned at about 9 to 10 months, and then 45 days after that, then go to the auction yard.
Right on.
Perfect. Okay, thanks for clarifying that, Carol. Sorry, but I misspoke on that piece. Okay, so now let's talk about we are here at Cattleman's Livestock Market. Let's talk to them and give them an idea of what happens once we bring the cattle off an operation such as yourself and bring them to this facility. What do we do with them next?
So once the cattle come in, they come in trailers, right? So you might be seeing those really big trailers that go down the road. Those can hold about 80 head, but you have your smaller trailers, and those can hold much less. But through there, we end up putting them in the loading area, and then we get the cattle unloaded.
So what our students are seeing now is the actual unloading of a cattle trailer. So go ahead and walk us through what that process looks like.
So they're going to pull in, and then we're going to open up this gate, and there you can see in this video right here we have pairs, right? So we're going to have cows and we're going to have calves. Now you're going to see this gentleman, he has tags in his hands, right? These tags all have numbers. We only have so many pens here at the sale yard, so we want to make sure we're able to utilize them as much as we possibly can. So those tags are going to be telling us exactly who the person is that owns these cattle. Then right here in this clip, you're going to see that we're going to tag the mama and the baby. That way we know exactly who's who, and that way we have the pairs lined out and there's no confusion and no mixing.
So that must be some really sticky glue that's on the back of that tag in order to fling it on the cattle and have it stick. Is that correct?
Yes, very sticky, and it takes a little bit of talent to be able to throw that tag.
I know, I couldn't do it. I was totally amazed when I saw that happen. So, just a reminder, if you have any questions, go ahead and use that Q&A box. We would love to answer those for you. So, once they come off the trailer and then they need to be put somewhere, is that right?
Yes, that's going to
Oh,
be exactly right.
we have a question from Mrs. Taylor's class from Dent Elementary. They want to know how long after a calf is born can it walk?
Oh, it takes very little. So you know how we take months to be able to walk? That is not the case with cattle. It might take only an hour or two, and that calf is just starting to stumble around. It's getting up on its legs, and then it's already nursing.
Wow, that's a pretty impressive. I wish my kids could have learned to walk that quickly. That would have been awesome. So, okay, so we've gotten the cattle off the trailers. They're ready to go in to a pen of some sort. Walk us through that process after they're unloaded.
So after the cattle are unloaded, they're going to be going into pens, right? Now, each of these pens, now we're here on a Tuesday, so these pens are going to be empty, but on a Wednesday, these pens are going to be very full. We want to make sure that none of the cattle are mixed, right? Meaning that we sort cattle by like kinds. So we put all of the cattle that are similar in their own groups from their own home.
Awesome. I think we actually have a clip of last Wednesday, so you can see this a little bit better.
So now that we have all of the cattle unloaded, we pen them, meaning that they all go into their very own pens, and we group them in like kinds. And eventually, when it's time, we'll run them up to the ring, and then they will be sold.
So, Grayson, if I'm not mistaken, you're currently standing on something that's over the pins. I mean, we see how full the pins were a couple Wednesdays ago, and today those pins are empty. But what is that you're walking on?
So this is going to be called the catwalk. I don't know if you can see how long this goes, but it goes over the entire part of the pens that are under this covered area. Now, obviously, we have a lot more pens out back that aren't covered, but this right here is able to help our buyers quickly and efficiently look at the cattle that are for sale. That way they can get a quick overview and they can do it quickly and safely as well, just going right on over the top of them.
Nice. Okay, we have some more questions for you. Miss Madera's class wants to know, why do you separate the different cattle in the trailers? Why do you separate them? And if you're following along on our worksheet, it is true, cattle are separated into like kinds. Why are they separated?
So, for multiple reasons, I'm going to answer this in two parts. We separate them when they're in the trailers. That way, all of the similar sized animals are safely traveling down the road. We want to make sure that everybody is safe. But secondly, the reason we sort them into like kinds here at the sale yard is that our buyers, okay, let's think of it this way. If you were going to the grocery store and you wanted to buy apples, and oranges, you wouldn't want to, and bananas, right? You're not going to want to try to buy them all at the same time. You'd want to individually go through and pick and look at, I would like a red apple, not a green one, right? I want this kind of orange. I want this kind of banana. You don't want to just buy them in a lump sum, right? So that's the same reason that we're going to be sorting cattle. That way they're as uniformed and similar as you can possibly make them. That way the buyer knows kind of a better idea of what they're buying and what they're getting, and it's very similar, and they make sure that they're giving the right amount of money for that animal.
Okay, we have another question. Miss Baum's class wants to know, after you've unloaded them, like for example, today is a Tuesday and there's cattle here, they don't sell until Wednesday. Do they get to eat and drink while they're here?
Oh, yes. We want them to be as happy and content as possible, right? So we're kind of a little bit of a hotel. So we want to give them the best bed and service breakfast that we possibly can. So we have these really big feed wagons that go all over the place, and they're going to feed all these cattle. And we clean their water troughs typically about every week. That way they're getting fresh water and they're happy.
Okay, interesting. So we've taken them off the trailer. We've seen them in their light kinds, and we've seen what it looks like when maybe it's a Tuesday and it's not quite as full. The cattle are eating, they're happy. What happens on auction day? Because that's a very different scene, and I think we have a clip from last Wednesday.
So now that the cattle have been placed in their pens, we then move them up to this lane where we run them up, and they're going right below us right here, and you can see that they each have their own individual slots, right? Because we try to keep them in like kinds. From these pens, they then go into the ring where all the buyers, the auctioneer, the clerks, where everybody is there to get them sold, and then they leave the ring.
Okay, so we're still going to keep, regardless of where they're at, whether they're getting off the trailer, whether they're in a pen, whether they're in the chute to go up to the auction ring, we're keeping those cattle constantly in light kinds, correct?
Yes, that would be correct. We always want to try to keep them in their uniform group. That way they get to hang out with their friends and they're getting ready to go into the auction ring.
Okay, I have some questions for you. So what we're doing now is Grayson's walking from the back of the sale yard to the front. So while she's walking, let's ask her some questions. So we have several classes who would like to know how many cattle come through the sale yard on Wednesday. And then Mrs. Park's class wants to know how many per year. So we're going to do a little math. Not by we, I mean, you students are going to do a little math. So, Grayson, give or take how many per Wednesday, and then you can multiply that by the number of Wednesdays in a year.
Okay, so this is a great question and it really varies. So the way that it varies is on sometimes on sales, we might have somewhere around 5,000 head that are going to sell on one Wednesday. Now, other days though, we might only have 500. Now, you might be wondering why we have such a change. It's because of the time of year. Certain times of year are super busy. All of our cattle producers and ranchers are bringing these cattle to the sales. But other times of year, people are holding on to their cattle, they're letting their calves get bigger. So that answer is really going to vary. Now, to give you an average answer, I would say somewhere around 2,000, 2,500 head. Now, mind you, this is one sale yard. If you go to different sales across the United States, that answer is going to vary.
Okay, so for our class that wants to know per year, go ahead and multiply, give or take 2,000 times 52 Wednesdays a year, and that'll give you the answer per year on average. Okay, we have another class wants to know, we have several classes actually that want to know, what is the biggest or heaviest cow that you have sold here?
Oh, I would have to say somewhere around 2,700 pounds.
2,700 pounds. That's a pretty big animal.
Very.
Okay. Mrs. Holstrom's class wants to know how many different types of beef cattle are sold here.
Oh, that is a great question, and it's really going to vary. I'm just going to give you some of our top cattle that you'll probably see when you're driving through the field. If you see an animal that's all white, it's probably going to be a Charolais. If you see an animal that's all black, it's probably going to be an Angus. And then one last one that's pretty common is if you see an animal that's red with a white face, that's typically going to be a Hereford.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. We have a really fun question, and I think this is so cute. Miss Loomis class wants to know what happens if a cow escapes.
Oh, if a cow escapes, okay, that's actually happened before. So we have
Oh,
these
okay.
things, and they're called cattle guards. So cattle guards are slits of pipe, and then they have holes, right? So we have flat feet, so we can get over the top of those, no problem. Cattle, not so much, right? Because their legs are like this. So we have cattle guards at both entrances and exits. So if the cattle were to escape, it's not going to be super dangerous, right? They're just going to be in the parking lot. So then we just go open the gate and we shoo them back into their pen.
Got it. Okay, so no cattle are escaping on the Highway 99, so we can all rest assured. Okay, we have several classes, like half a dozen classes that want to know what is it that you're feeding the cattle while they're in their holding pens waiting to go to the auction yard
Yeah,
sale
so
ring.
we're just going to be feeding them hay. The hay might change from alfalfa to beardless wheat, all sorts of things, but we're typically just going to feed them hay out of our feed wagon. The way that the feed wagon works is it's a piece of machinery that follows behind the tractor, right? And it has a slot, and it just shoots the feed out as the tractor's moving. It just puts the feed right in front of their feed bunks.
Okay. So now we've seen, Grayson, that you've moved from the catwalk and now you're in something that we call an auction block. And so today that auction block is empty, but a few Wednesdays ago it wasn't. Let's take a look.
So now we are on the block. Now all of us have very important jobs. On that side, we're going to have our guy who runs the gates. His job is to open up the gates to let the cattle into the ring, and then he is to open the gates to let them out. He has to be very careful not to mix those cattle. Then we have our auctioneer. Mind you, we are selling all day long. So we have multiple auctioneers whose jobs are to get the cattle sold efficiently. Now we have our clerk. Her job is to be writing down what the cattle sold for, who bought them, all of that good information. And we also have our pinner. Her job is to use that microphone to tell the ladies out back where these cattle need to go. Something else that's very interesting is this shows the weight of all of the cattle in the ring. Right now we have one cow in there and her weight is 1,060 pounds. We also have this screen. So every day of the week, you guys could come online and you could watch us work. So people cannot make it to the auction, they can bid through that platform, and there's a lot of great stuff with that. Now we've seen the block, here's what my daily view is.
So we've seen your daily view, Grayson. There's something else that's special about that auction block. When cattle come in, how is it that you guys know? And I know we have a clip about this. How do you know whose cattle are what when they come in?
Yeah, so we have lots of methods to be able to know whose cattle they are when they come in. One of those is, do you remember earlier when I talked about the back tag numbers? Those are going to be able to be punched in by the clerk. She types in those numbers and then it pops right on up saying, oh, these are Grayson Haydenmeyer's cattle, or whoever's they might be. Another method that we have are notes. Now, these are the back tag numbers. We have all sorts of them and they come on these and they go in numerical order and we have all sorts of these that we put on the animal. See how it's right there? Yeah, but we also have note cards.
All right, let's see a clip of how those note cards get to the block.
So to make sure that we're able to know whose cattle these are, we have a conveyor belt. The conveyor belt brings up these things and what we call them are notes, right? Or mail. With these pieces of paper, we're able to see how many head are on there, what kind they are, and who they are from.
So one really interesting piece, and you can see it behind me here, the floor of this auction is actually a scale. So you can see when the cattle go through how much they weigh, and then that information gets put on a screen. So if you're following along right here, the floor of the auction yard is, excuse me, the floor of the auction ring is actually a scale that weighs the cattle as they go through. So we have some questions regarding the actual process of like the cattle. So talk to us about how much a cow is worth.
Okay, so this once again is another great question, and the answer is really going to vary, right? Because not everything, okay, if you were to take a certain kind of car and compare it to another car, their value is not going to be equal, right? So I'm just going to give you some average numbers. So typically, for just a cow, we're probably going to see her bring maybe around $2,000, maybe a little bit more. Now, if that cow has a baby next to her, that's obviously going to make her value increase, right? Because she already has that baby. So sometimes we might see those cattle sell for around $4,000. The market right now is super, super high in the cattle business, which I know you probably see that when you go in the grocery store and all of that. So that answer is really going to change from month to month and year to year. But right now, we might see a cow and a calf bring $4,000. And last week, we had some really high numbers as well. They were bringing just under 5,000.
Wow, that's really impressive. So let's take a quick look, and then maybe if we ask Grayson really nice, she'll show us how she auctioneers. But let's take a look and see. So one of the things that I imagine would be a challenge, and we're going to see a clip of how an auction looks from like the back side, from the top of the auctionery and auction yard. What's some of the challenges, Grayson, that you face when you're selling cattle in that auction yard? And we can see the clip here. What's some of those challenges that you have?
So some of the challenges that we might be facing is seeing if that person is really bidding or not, right? So as you're going to see in this clip, on the block, we are very far away from the people. So they're not going to be able to say, I want to bid, I'm in. No, they're going to use their body language to be able to signal that to us. Now, if somebody is going across and they're saying, hey, how are you? And they're just waving at their friend and we take that as a bid and they get stuck with a $3,000 animal, they're probably not going to be all that happy, right? So we have to be very careful to make sure that we're taking the right bid. Most of the time, people bid like this or they'll bid like this.
Okay, so just a quick wave of their hand, and that brings us to a great point. So many of our friends are probably not familiar with what an auction yard looks like. So you can see in the clip that you're seeing, the cattle are let in by the person who's controlling the gates. They're on that scale that's on the auction floor, and there's a gentleman in the back waving a paddle. This paddle is just like a rattle, if I'm not mistaken, and it has a bunch of noisemakers in it. The cattle enter the sale ring, and the auctioneer then sells them to the people in the audience in the clip that you can see. And I believe we have a clip of how subtle some of those bids actually are. So if someone wants to buy the animal, they raise their hand like this. And Grayson or whoever's auctioneering then has to know that that means that they want to buy something. So this we have a question from Miss Taylor's class, and they want to know, how do auctioneers learn to talk so fast? And I have a question. Would you please sell us something so we can see how fast you talk?
So I'm 18 years old right now, and I've been auctioneering since I was 9 years old. So I've been an auctioneer for 9 years, and it takes a lot of time to hone your skill. There's a lot of schools that you can attend and all of that, and I will gladly auctioneer. Now I'm gonna start at $1, and I'm gonna go a little bit fast, and then I'm gonna slow it back down. That way you folks are able to hear it. All right. Here we go. I bid $1 now, $2 now, $2 down here now, $3 now, $4 now, $4 now, $5 now, $5 now, $5 now, $6, and now $6 now, $7 now, $7. Do you want to be $7 now? Wait, $8 now, $9 now, $9 now, $9 now, $10 now, $10 now, $10, and I sold it at $9.
$9. I can't believe what she sold for $9. Okay. Well, thank you, Grayson. That's pretty cool to see you're able to talk so quickly and what that looks like. So we've seen an auction from your side inside the block, what that looks like. We've seen it from the back side where people are bidding. Once you've sold that imaginary cow for $9, let's hope that's per pound. Then where do the cattle go after they're sold? I think we have a clip of what happens next.
Which something that you just brought up that I think might be really important to explain is that we actually sell animals by the pound most of the time. We don't sell them by the head. Now, when I refer to by the head, we mean a single individual animal, right? So, like I could say, I'm one head, right? That's cattle lingo, just so you know. So, that's how it works. But normally on yearlings and stalkers and these older cattle, we're going to be selling them by the pound. So I just wanted to explain that. But yes, so once we get done selling the cattle, they're going to exit the ring, and I believe you have a clip for that. So now that these cattle have gone through the ring, they have found their buyer, they have been sold, it is time for them to travel to their next pen. Now, these ladies on horses are going to be called penners. Their job is to follow the cattle and have them go to the proper pen. Every single buyer has their own pen. That way, none of the cattle get mixed, because eventually these cattle are going to have to be loaded out, meaning that they go onto a truck and they go to their new home.
Okay, so you can see after they leave the ring, the penners, which if you're following along on your worksheet, the last answer is penners. They use the horses to get those cattle out to the proper pen where they go, and then they go out back and wait to get loaded out. Each buyer has their own pen where their cattle go. That way, when they go to leave, they can just take theirs all at the same time. We have some great questions regarding how many cattle are actually sold at one time. I'm sure in those clips you can see that there's more than one cow or steer in the pen. Explain to our students how groups are sold.
Oh, this is another really good question. And it's once again really going to vary, because when we're working with animals, they're not carbon copies of one another. They're all very different. So we often try to get them in as big of groups as possible. Okay. So if we can, we'll sell 100 head from one consigner in one group. Now, if you saw the video of the ring, you're probably thinking to yourself, there's no way that you can fit 100 head in one ring. You'd be right. Okay. If you're thinking of like your 600-pound yearlings, we would probably break them into 4 groups of 25. So we'd get 25 in here, we'd weigh them, we'd get their weight, we'd send it out, we'd do that process 4 times, right, to get us to 100. 100 divided by 25 is 4. Okay. Then from there, we're going to send them on their way, and then we are going to sell those cattle to our buyers by their weight and by pounds, and we'll sell them that way.
Awesome. Okay, Miss Brink's class wants to know, why do auctioneers need to talk so fast?
Well, the reason why is because we want to try to quickly and efficiently get top dollar for these cattle. So once again, if we're selling 5,000 head in a day, that is going to be a super long day if we're not going quick. And really, we aren't just talking fast, we are using our voices and what we are saying to communicate with our buyer where we're at, how much they need to be if they want to get back in.
Okay, so we have some other questions. So if you're game, I'm going to do a few minutes. We're wrapping up here, but I have a few rapid fire questions if you're up for it. Is that okay?
Yep, sounds great to me.
All right, so students, this is it. Get in your questions if you have them. One of our classes wants to know what are some of the qualities that cow buyers are looking for in their cattle?
Well, this is a very good question. And now, once again, we have all sorts of classes of cattle coming in, right? So we might have just day old calves that are going to be sold here. We might have 14, 15-year-old cows. And don't worry, we have a buyer for every single classification of cattle. So, for instance, if we're looking for a yearling, right? So maybe something that's about 600 pounds, it's weaned from its mother, it's all vaccinated, it's ready to go to its new home to get bigger and gain weight, then they're probably going to be looking for an animal that has one, had its vaccinations. Two, that's weaned for 45 days because it means it's healthy, it can live on its own, it's ready to go, it's happy. They're probably also looking for an animal in good condition, meaning that it has a lot of flesh, it's not super skinny, it's happy.
Perfect. So Miss Holstrom's class wants to know, and this kind of goes to what you were just talking about. You have a buyer for everyone. Do you sell bulls at the auction?
Oh, yeah, we will sell bulls all the time.
Okay, so they do sell bulls. Oh, one of our classes, Miss Castanella's class, wants to know what's the most expensive type of beef. We've had a few questions about that. So, is there maybe a breed that seems to be more popular than others?
So right now, in this market, if you were to go back maybe 50 plus years ago, Herefords were really popular, but that's actually changed. So right now, I would say that the hottest slash most popular breed is probably going to be Angus. They've done an incredible job marketing, and people just seem to really love Black Angus.
Oh, we have someone who wants to know, were you just, Miss Cammie's class wants to know, were you just showing off your skills today, or do you actually sell on Wednesdays?
Oh, I actually sell on Wednesdays. I've been here for almost 2 years, and I work at two different livestock markets.
Okay. More questions about our cattle. Why do we use name tags instead of naming all the cattle? Mrs. Webster's class would like to know.
Oh, that is a fabulous question. The reason we do tags, though, is because we would have a really hard time remembering 100 heads' names, right? Can you imagine going into a big public setting and remembering every single person's name instantaneously, and then you're going to have to do that thousands of times? We just aren't that smart, right? So we have to use tags to be able to remember who they came from.
Okay. Oh, Miss Barrett's class wants to know, where do you take auctioneer classes at?
Oh, that's a great question. So there's places all across the United States. Personally, where I took schools at was in Turlock, California, with world champion auctioneer Max Oliveira and world champion livestock auctioneer Johnny Rogers and Ralph Wade. That's where I started going when I was about 10 years old.
Okay, we're going to do two final questions. Miss Thompson's class wants to know, what's the highest price that a cow or a animal has brought at this auction yard?
Well, that is a good question. And then I figured I'd add this in too. So at bull sales, we'll see bulls sell for about $500,000, right? So cattle are worth a lot depending on where you go. Here at the sale yard, I'd probably say the highest we'll sell a cow is somewhere around $4,500 if it's a cow and a calf pair.
Okay, I lied. I'm going to do two more. Miss Berg's class wants to know about how many people attend the auction, both in person and online on Wednesdays on average.
On Wednesdays, I would say probably somewhere around 70 people, but probably a lot of those are just people that are just enjoying themselves, wanting to watch what we do and like it. But I'd probably say that only maybe around 25 of them are going to be bidding at this sale yard specifically.
Okay, final question because it's so cute. Miss Brink's class wants to know what made you want to be an auctioneer.
Well, that's a really good question, once again. And the reason I became an auctioneer is nobody in my family auctioneers, right? We actually just ranch. So the way that it kind of started was we had class jobs. When I was in fifth grade, we had all of these desks and we had to pay monopoly money on them, right? And then from there, we had to earn that monopoly money. So you could be a fish feeder, turn on the light switch, librarian, class auctioneer, because at the end of the week, you could take that remaining money and you could buy candy or board games, all that good stuff. And I came home and I've been in and out of the sale yard since I was a baby, right? Because we had either been selling cattle or buying cattle. And I explained to my dad, I said, Dad, I think I want to try to be an auctioneer. And he goes, well, all right. So he started getting me lessons. And then from there, it ended up becoming a lifelong career for me. So I am a fundraiser auctioneer. I sell livestock. I sell all sorts of things as an auctioneer.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I want to thank you so much. And a fun fact, Grayson actually has cattle that you probably couldn't see in the back because they're really far off in the distance, but Grayson's cattle are actually here today. So fun fact. I want to thank auctioneer Grayson so much for being here today and sharing her knowledge and wisdom and showing off some of her talents. We really, really appreciate it. Also, big thank you to Cattlemen's Livestock Market for letting us be here, as well as San Joaquin County Agricultural Commissioner's Office and San Joaquin County, as well as the San Joaquin Stanislaus Cattle Women and Cattlemen. They help sponsor this video. So thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you, Grayson, so much for sharing with us all of your knowledge. And thank you guys for being here. We really appreciate it. And we hope you enjoyed your adventure in agriculture.